Okay, wonderful. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our first session that's specific to different, I guess, business focuses. So today we're going to be talking a bit about some retail-focused organizations. So I know we have a small group today, but I would love to hear from everybody maybe in the group what organization they're from and maybe what type of business that they do. And so we do have two options, I guess, today for communicating. I will say I'm going to keep my video off for this morning, just because the service where I'm at isn't that great. So I figure my slides are a lot more important than seeing me. But if at any time you'd like to use your mic, feel free to unmute yourself and chat that way. And if not, we do have the chat box feature that I'd be happy to read back for anyone, and we can definitely be able to engage in that way as well. Okay, so while people are sharing, what I'm going to do is I am going to pull up just kind of this schedule of events. I know that if you are here today with our retail focus organization, then this might be the only one that you're joining, but you might as well also see that there are some different sections that maybe fit your needs later on. Okay, so Josh says cannabis retail industry, community development field, nonprofit sector. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so just in terms of kind of what to expect. So far, I guess we've done our introductory power lunch, which was last week. And then this week we have our retail focused businesses. Next week we have community and service-based organizations. And then the week after that, we have tourism and hospitality. And so one thing that we've liked to do is be able to expand on the learning, because it's definitely very hard to kind of get in everything we want to get in this small period here. And we know we're throwing a lot at you guys at once. So one thing that we wanted to do was be able to give everybody the opportunity to kind of expand on the learning that they have today. If they have any questions or anything like that, Thinkific is a place that you're able to kind of explore. We do have a portion of the presentation where we look at dementia-friendly design. And so if it's something that you're interested in after the fact, to be able to kind of learn a little bit more about your organization or some things that you might want to look to do at your organization, we absolutely would love to be able to help you with that. So we have a section on our Thinkific that will help you to, I guess, build off of that some more, so you can upload your photo. And then what we'll do is we'll give some considerations, because we do like to kind of point out here that in a perfect world, the places in which we interact and engage would be all dementia friendly and would be age friendly, but certainly that takes a lot of time and money. And so that's something that we definitely want to take into consideration. So we're going to try and give you guys some more tangible tools that maybe you can make some small changes or considerations. Okay, so if you're looking to expand on today's session, we will have up the link afterward that we can send you as well. But the direct link to our Thinkific is training.personcentereduniverse.com. So you're also able to visit our website. And then if you go under the training section, it will take you right to Thinkific. And then you can just sign up under this course. And if anybody has any difficulty signing on afterward, my email will be at the end of the session, and we can help get you set up. Okay, so Lorna says nonprofit association for retired Canadian Navy members. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so keeping in mind that we do have a short amount of time to be together today, what we wanted to do was mainly look at design of the environment and then communication and supportive strategies. So, how do we look at the spaces in which we engage and the ways in which we engage? And how do we make sure that those are dementia friendly practices? So there are some slides today that I might skim through a little quickly, but you will have access to all of these slides and then a little bit more information building off of each section on Thinkific that if you are looking to explore a little bit more, we'd be really happy to help you out with that. So, we're going to start off this morning with a little bit on design and the environment. So, we're going to look at different ways that we navigate the retail world and navigate the business world in general. And then we're going to look at some dementia friendly takeaways. So, what are 10 quick and easy changes that you could make to your organization to make it a little bit more dementia friendly? And then as well, I do have some photo examples of kind of uh, design practice that could be improved upon, and then as well some positive design practice on a project that we worked with the Alzheimer's Society in New Brunswick with. So I'll show you those photos as well today. And then we will take a small break, probably just 5 minutes, so that people can kind of stretch their legs. We are only together for an hour and a half today, or an hour and 15 minutes left. So we'll just take a small break so that everybody can um, get up, get a drink of water, stretch your legs, and then we'll come back and we will talk about some communication and supportive strategies. So we're going to look at some challenges that individuals who are living with dementia may be facing, and then how do we look at those challenges and then find ways to support them. And then we're going to look at what does dementia friendly service mean, and then look at some supportive exchange practice. Okay, so I'm just going to dive in. So hopefully this will work. So again, for those who are just joining us, if you have any thoughts kind of throughout the session or any questions or anything like that, I'd be really happy to have you throw them in the chat or just over your microphone. But I'm just going to show you this example from Alzheimer's Research UK. And so, of course, it is something that's animated, but it's an experience that they've been exploring into the world of virtual reality to kind of show you what it's like as an individual who's living with dementia to be able to go and participate in these activities of daily living. So, in this example here, this person is going to get their groceries. So, I will show you this video here. And let me know if you can't hear it or if it's not loud enough.
Right. There are only a few things to get. I know I need milk, tea, and bread. Was it? I can't make out. It's Joe. Oh, it'll come to me when I see things. Okay, what did the list say? Tea. There are so many different types. Where's Joe got to? Maybe this looks familiar. Right, what have we got here? Sugar. Sugar. Yes, this looks like it. Milk. Ah, this looks right. Milk.
Right. Have you got everything we needed from the list?
I think so.
Where have all these biscuits come from, Mum?
I don't know. The shop looks different. Yes, it's different.
No, it's just the normal shop. Nothing's changed. Look, we don't need all this sweet stuff. We've still got lots in the cupboard at home. Not to worry. I'll take them back to the shelf.
Hi, sorry, we're getting busy, so can I ask you to pay, please?
Oh, yes, sorry, I was just... where's Joe gone now?
That will be £5.60, please. Do you need help packing?
What? No, I don't think...
Have you got a bonus card?
I don't have... have I got what?
A bonus card to collect points?
I just want to have these. I just want these things, please. What do I have to pay?
£5.60, please.
Oh, yes. £5.60. £5.60. Sorry, £5. I've got pound coins, I think. £5.60. I've got a £2 coin. I think this will cover it.
Look, there isn't enough here. It's £5.60. Do you have enough money?
I thought oh, where's Joe? Why isn't he back yet? I'm sorry, I haven't got the right. I haven't got the right person.
Maybe you should go to the side and I can help some other customers, yeah?
Everything all right, Mum? Is it time to pay?
Yes, it's £5.60, but I've only got £3.50 here. Have you got enough?
Yes, yes, of course. Here you go. Another £2.10. Sorry about that.
Right, thanks. Have a good day.
Yes, you too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I'd love to hear your thoughts from that video. I know the animation is a little different, but it is something that we wanted to kind of show, just to show you with both the physical environment, but also the way that the shop employees interacted with this individual who's living with dementia. What were some challenges that you saw throughout? The constant dismissal, yep. So I often think of it as kind of the anxiety that you feel almost as when you're thinking of going to the grocery store with your parent as a child and you're not the one paying, you're not sure the payment method that's going on, and your mom has had to run to go get milk because she's forgotten milk. And just that feeling of not knowing how to navigate that space, not knowing how to interact with the cashier, it's something that, although it's a totally different experience, we need to remember that individuals who are living with dementia are living with different cognitive and physical challenges that might cause them to engage with the world in a really different way. Okay, being rushed and interrogated. And of course, the more rushed you feel, the more stressed you get and just makes things worse. Absolutely. And so we're going to start with looking at the physical environment, but as we move into kind of supportive strategies, we'll definitely think of that video as well. And for those that were able to join us last week, we also showed kind of more of a real life example of somebody who's living with dementia that's going to engage with the world around them. They're going to perform different activities of daily living. So I probably will use that term quite a bit. And so essentially, when we're talking about activities of daily living, it can be anything from making lunch, to getting dressed, to being able to go engage with the community, go to the grocery store, the bank, things like that. So we want to make sure that when an individual who especially is living within the community is going to engage with the world around them to be able to do these activities of daily living, we want to make sure that we're creating supportive structures for them. So that's kind of why we're here today. So I'm just going to try to make sure it doesn't play for us again. There. Oh, the photo didn't transfer very well, but this is I'm based out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, but this is the view of our Superstore, our Atlantic Superstore. So I'm sure you guys have all been in one. And so I guess the blurriness of the photo coming up on the screen might be a bit of a metaphor for the challenges that somebody might experience when trying to navigate the world of retail. But just kind of from a brief glance, you can just see the abundance of choice, the abundance of options, the bright colors, the bright lights. And so for somebody that isn't living with a cognitive impairment, and for people that are looking to market these products and be able to sell within this space, that might be something that might seem like a really positive thing, because of course you're going to be engaged by seeing all of these different options, and you want to be able to kind of give people that feeling of choice, and having different brand names available, and the bright lights make it easier to see. So I just want you to consider, when we talk about some of these challenges that individuals who are living with dementia maybe having, that what is good for somebody that isn't experiencing cognitive challenges isn't necessarily going to be as positive of an experience for them as well. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly go through these slides, just being mindful of time. And this is something that we definitely will explore more on the Thinkific if you want to look at that after. But I just wanted to touch on some pieces in terms of design and the environment to kind of give you a better idea of what people are experiencing. So I won't go through all of these bullet points. We'll let you guys go through that at the end. But just some things to consider. Navigation is one of our biggest pieces. So if you're thinking of the place that you work, I'd love if you'd put it in the chat, maybe what are some navigational pieces or challenges that you might think right off the bat somebody might have. And if you think of them while we're going through these different design elements, feel free to share them throughout. But I just wanted to start and touch on navigation and some, I guess, big challenges that might arise. If you go to the Thinkific after, you're going to be able to see some of the reasons why these are bigger challenges to individuals who are living with dementia. So looking at different things from depth perception, it might be something that an individual is living with a particular type of dementia that causes hallucinations. So they might be looking at the floor in front of them and it might look really slippery or wet, when in reality, there's just a wax waxy finish on the floor. So navigation is something that's really important to consider because in order for people to feel comfortable going to these spaces, they need to be able to move around them. So where are the entrances? Where are the exits? What are the important spaces that people need to be able to navigate to? Is it the counter where they check out? Is it the customer bathrooms? If you're an organization that is assisting people, I guess, in an office, where is it that they go within that office? What is the signage looking like? So there's different things that we'll look at with navigation. So just some big takeaways kind of right off the bat. Entrances and exits, you always want to make sure that they're very visible. Add extra seating so that people feel comfortable. They're able to kind of take a spot, regroup themselves. As we said in the chat, they're being rushed. We don't want people to feel as though it's a rushed experience. We want it to be more of a relaxed experience. We're going to talk about signage a little bit, but ensuring that our signage is very clearly written and simple to be able to both see and kind of experience, but also simple in the verbiage that we're using as well. And then sometimes as well, you might look at using different landmarks for wayfinding. So if you're thinking about coming into your store, is there something that really points out that this is where you check out? Because it might not look as typical as it did in the past. And I know sometimes we like to get a little creative with design and look at things that are a little bit more abstract, but it's important to remember that that can be something that's really difficult to differentiate for somebody who's living with dementia. Okay, so different things with signage. So you want to make sure that your signs have simple to read lettering. You also may want to look at having a universally recognized symbol. And so if you're looking for any universally recognized symbols, I can definitely point you in the direction of a few different organizations that kind of list all of the different examples for that. So I'll use a bathroom, for example. If we're thinking of a bathroom, if you're thinking of it in a literal sense, if you are somebody that is taking a little bit more time to process, you might hear bathroom and think, oh, there's a bathtub in there. Or a washroom is a place to clean up. Or a restroom might be a place that you associate with sitting down to relax or catch your breath. So it's just interesting, even if you think of this one space, that we have bathroom, washroom, restroom. If you go overseas, you might hear toilet. So just thinking of different ways that we can really express the purpose of the signage. And so that's why it's also important to add in kind of the well-recognized symbols as well. You always want to place signs on the doors or openings that they are referring to avoid any navigational confusion. And so it's often said that signage should be placed at eye level. And so typically we say that's 4 feet. And so of course that might not be for everyone, but that's taking into consideration as well individuals who might be, say, in a wheelchair, or an individual who may be using an ambulatory assist. So they might be using a walker or a cane. So it's important to remember that they might be more focused as to what's going on the ground in front of them, and making sure that they're not tripping or they're not falling, but that they're able to navigate the space without kind of having to have their head in the clouds to be able to see these signs that might be way above these doors. So another piece, I'm just going to skip quickly through these so that we have enough time, making sure that we're placing our signs at decision points. So if we're thinking of a fork in the road, and not taking for granted that just because a sign was placed at the beginning of the store to say where something is, that we're going to necessarily be able to remember kind of the map that we've set out in the beginning. So making sure that at all of these decision-making points that we are having appropriate signage. You also want to look at having some clear contrasts, so both within the sign itself, but also on the wall. So as you can see in this photo in the background, they have used signage that has a dark color contrast to the wall, but also very clear lettering as well. And then just making sure in terms of where your signs are, you want to make sure that they're at entrances, exits, glass doors. Bathrooms are really vital, making sure that it's well lit. Flooring is one that I know I could go on quite a tangent, and I'm always made fun of at conferences and things because we'll go to these hotels and I'll just think that none of the flooring or the carpeting is dementia friendly. So if you think of the hallways in hotels, that's always the example I use for poor dementia friendly design practice. And I'll show an example of that. But just some things to consider with different flooring. Softer surfaces are going to help with acoustics, so not as kind of loud or distracting sounds. Thinking about the flooring that you have in high traffic areas. It's important to remember, of course, where we live and how we spend 6 months out of the year potentially tracking the outdoors in and making sure that we are preventing any fall risks or tripping hazards. And remembering that it's not enough just to put up kind of a wet floor sign. It's something that we want to make sure that we are keeping on top of things. We are making sure that if we have a mat at the entrance of our establishment, that it's not one that is going to get absolutely soaking wet, and then people are going to then be tracking that through. So it's something that can take an extra step to be able to fix, but it's important to remember that both with dementia friendly practices as well as age friendly practices, fall risks are a really, really big challenge and something that a lot of older adults don't feel as though, especially in winter months, they can go out and navigate the world and engage in the ways that they used to. So we do have some benefits now, especially with COVID, that we do have a lot more options with delivery services and things like that. So people don't necessarily always have to come out, especially in poor weather, but we always want to make sure that we're ready. And so when you have two different types of flooring, it's often best to keep their shininess similar to one another. So I have a photo example here that you can see the difference between two wax flooring. So the one on the left might be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, something that we would kind of lean towards a little bit more. It's perceived as cleaner, but for an individual who's living with dementia, that might be perceived as a slippery or wet surface. So what that's going to do is make them a little bit more anxious about navigating this space. And it's also going to change their gait and the way that they move throughout this space. So I know you can probably all think of if you're walking across a parking lot, in the summertime, you're probably going to walk with a lot of purpose and a lot of speed. In many ways. And then in the winter, if you look down and you see that it's a little shiny, or you're afraid of black ice potentially, or you can see the ice, you definitely change the way in which you walk. So your gait is a little bit different. You might be trying to take some practices from your days of skating, but you're more mindful and more tense of the possibility of a fall. So these are just some things to avoid for flooring. So different dark tiles, shiny floors, anything that can be misconstrued as potentially a fall risk or a hole. Oftentimes people will see a tiled floor and think that it's a hole or tripping hazard. Speckled flooring is really challenging. I'm just going to move forward and show, oh, I don't have that example, but I'll show you an example here in a minute. With our lighting, we want to look at utilizing some natural light. So we can do that in many different ways. I know that it's not always possible to kind of rebuild and make sure that we have plenty of window space, but there are a couple things that we can do. You want to make sure that your windows are cleaned as often as possible, both on the inside and out, to allow that natural light in. Leaving the blinds open and the curtains open when you can, using that mixture of natural and artificial light. So making sure that we're helping each other in any way possible. And then making sure, again, our signage, our entrances, and our exits are really well lit. As well, with our natural light, we want to look at avoiding large shadows. So as much as your plant might need a lot of light to survive, if it's something that is causing shadows to be cast upon the floor, that's something that could be perceived as a tripping hazard for somebody who's living with dementia. Okay, so when we are looking at design and the environment, as I had said before, it is, I guess, really easy to kind of wish that the world was built in a way that was just kind of dementia friendly right from the beginning. But of course, that's not always possible. That takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of So we wanted to just provide today some quick tips. So 10 dementia friendly takeaways that you can bring back to your organization that are really going to make a big difference. So the first one, a lot of these have to do with signage and navigation, because I feel personally that that has some of the biggest impacts on engaging with the space. So using universally recognized symbols on your signage. I have a photo example of that here in a minute or two. And then using different wording that is kind of more universally recognized. I know we can probably all think of the time that we were in maybe a fancier restaurant or a restaurant that was a little bit more quirky, and you go to use the bathroom, and instead of having either gender neutral bathrooms or men's and women's bathrooms, you might have I've seen some where they have pictures of deer and they might have does and bucks, or they might have a picture of a cowboy and a cowgirl, lads and lasses. So just different things that might seem quirky in at the time, but can be really detrimental for somebody's experience with dementia when they're trying to engage in these spaces, because a large reason why people don't feel comfortable going out into the world might come down to their ability to use the bathroom, have access to that in an easy way. If you're a caregiver who's helping somebody who's living with dementia and you need to be able to assist them in the bathroom, that's something that you're really going to take into consideration in these spaces in which you engage. The flooring can be a really big one. So considering a matte finish for waxing instead of our shiny floors. So I know, of course, that doesn't look as great all of the time, but it's something safety-wise that can be a really big help and make a really big difference. Our fork in the road, so placing signage at navigational points. So not taking for granted that that first point of contact when somebody comes into a business is going to be the only one and the thing that sticks with them the whole time. So remembering that as you would at a grocery store, each aisle has to have appropriate signage. I know personally, when I go through a grocery store, if I have something on my list that I don't typically buy or might only buy a couple times a year, it's always the hardest thing to find because you almost get into a rut of comfortability that you know exactly, say, where the chip aisle is, or you know where to go for milk, different things like that. And I could go into um, design practices for stores like that. And I usually use the Costco example of how their meat is at the back of the store so that you have to go through the entire store and potentially see some other goodies while you go through. Um, but it's important to remember that navigation within the store is something that is an ongoing process. You always want to consider your signage. So one that we didn't really touch on in kind of our spark notes of design, but that you can explore a little bit more on our Thinkific is color choices. So I won't say today that there are any kind of good or bad colors out there. Each color kind of has its own purpose, and creates an ambiance or a mood that is going to be both different for everyone, but also different for each space. So, say if we're thinking of the color um, blue or greens, those are more calming colors. And so, when I say that as well, I don't mean neon greens or anything like that, but those blue colors are a more calming experience. So, that's something that um, you might want to think about the purpose of your space, ensuring that the colors match the purpose. So, of course, if you run a massage therapy business and you want your clients to come in and be very relaxed in that space, or say if you are therapist, that's a place that they would want to be really relaxed, or a hair salon. You might choose kind of more of those neutral, cooler tones. Whereas if you're a place where you're trying to get people really engaged and you're trying to create a space that is going to kind of keep people awake and engaged, you're going to look at kind of some of those warmer and brighter colors, such as your reds and yellows are kind of a touchy subject. Sometimes people shy away from yellows, but just remembering kind of your color choices. So if you do have any questions on colors, feel free to reach out to myself or to our Thinkific, and as well be able to explore those slides on Thinkific where we dive a little bit deeper into our color choices. So again, another huge takeaway that is really important, that's something that's easy to do or easy to consider, is placing our signage at eye level. So when we say that, we do want to acknowledge as well in terms of kind of fire safety. Oftentimes you do want the signage up high, say above a fire exit, so that people kind of, if they're in a busy space, they are able to look up and see that. But having the additional signage at eye level can really help somebody who's living with dementia, or even somebody who may be in a wheelchair or using a walker or a cane. So, in terms of our bathrooms, I know that, I guess, as a society, we've been making this shift quite a bit, but I just wanted to kind of touch on gender neutral bathrooms. It's something that can really allow for a lot of dignity and respect and upholding personhood for the individual who's living with dementia, as well as their caregiver. So, caregivers play a really big role in helping to navigate the space. And depending on the caregiving dynamic, it might be something that typically they might not access the same bathrooms. But say if you are a gentleman that is helping your mom who lives with dementia go into a store, it's something that you are really going to take into consideration, that if your mom needs help in the bathroom, do we take her into the men's bathroom or do we take her into the women's bathroom? That's why these gender neutral bathrooms and kind of solo stall bathrooms are really important, especially just for accessibility sake, but for them to be able to go and provide that care if they need it on a day out, and ensure that both parties and those around them are comfortable, and we're not making kind of any more distress than need be. In terms of, if we come back to our weather, which I know can be a touchy subject this time of year, but floor mats are a really big reality in our world. But just thinking of different floor mats that you use, you want to think about avoiding dark and contrasting floor mats. So if you see a black floor mat on the floor, for us, we might just see a place to kind of wipe off our shoes. But for an individual who's living with dementia or might be dealing with some different visual or perception changes, they might see a floor in or a hole in the floor. And so they might try not to step on it in fear of kind of tripping into the floor, or they might feel very anxious around kind of navigating that space. And then, of course, with our signage, we want to ensure that our signage is well lit and easily seen. So if you're going to look at lighting anything, you really want to make sure that your signage is something that you go the extra mile for. And then an easy one is trying to utilize our natural light as much as possible. So looking at kind of what do we have at our fingertips and how do we use that to the best of our ability. And then with the last piece, we touch on it a little bit more on the Thinkific, but just considering using traditional design versus abstract design. So I know there's many examples out there, but if you look at a park bench sometimes you look at it and you think, I don't know if that is a piece of artwork or if that's a place for me to sit down and rest. So while it might be a great conversation piece, or it might be something that is very aesthetically pleasing for somebody who's living with dementia, that's going to be something that's really confusing and really challenging to them. So something to consider in terms of our design elements. Okay, so I just wanted to show you some pictures now before we kind of move along to our communication and our supportive strategies. But I wanted to show you, I guess, a typical office building or a typical business. And so, of course, it might look a little bit different than retail. But again, if anybody did have any examples or would like us to look at your space, we would be happy to look over any photos or videos that you might have, and be able to kind of look at the space and make some suggestions. And so one thing that I would really like to note is that, of course, it's not always easy to make these changes. It might be something that is structural, or it might be something that financially isn't easy to fix. So while we can't always make those design changes, we can be aware of the potential challenges or obstructions that individuals who are living with dementia might be facing as a result. So we can be mindful when an individual comes in to access our business that we still do have, say, all of these options or things like that, but we want to create a space that we are able to help somebody navigate through that. So if we knew that or know that this is a challenge of our business, we're able to then kind of step up and maybe help in more of kind of a personable way if we can't change the physical. So just looking at this space here, so it's just a typical office space that people would come into. So as you can see to the left, that is our example of, I guess, the space where the secretary would sit and kind of some communal space for the people within the office. And then the center photo is the entrance to the building. So this particular one is on the right-hand side of the photo. And then just wanted to show a picture of the hallway to show a couple more examples. Okay, so these are some challenges that we might see and potential solutions. So on our left-hand side, we'll start with that photo there. At the top, I have circled kind of these shadows and the different casting of light. So you can see that, say, if there was signage there, those shadows or the kind of weird light patterns that's causing there is something that's going to be a little bit more tricky to the eye. And it's something that might be more difficult if you say need to read something behind, or it might be a bit more distracting. And then as well on the desk there, that's something that I guess sometimes we take for granted in trying to think of how people navigate, but always being able to add more signage and simple signage that's going to help somebody navigate the space when they engage in it. So right here, you can see it might be good to put who might be sitting at that desk and what do they do. So remembering when you go into a space, I know especially in a lot of stores where you might wear more plain clothes, it's something that sometimes I don't know who to ask for help. And so I know in some places you might have a polo or something or a community, not community, something that helps to kind of point you out a little bit more to the crowd, but also within that, letting them know what you do. So are you the manager? Are you somebody that is in the finance department, or are you somebody that is working the front desk? Because somebody that is working kind of the front desk might be able to help you a little bit more get where you're going than somebody who's in the finance department. So just kind of knowing who everybody is and what they do. And then at the bottom, I wanted to show kind of this tiling difference. So that's something that can be perceptually very challenging for somebody who's living with dementia, how you can see the tiles go up the wall a little bit. So that can almost be perceived as the wall continuing on further than you would think. And so it could cause somebody to kind of have some falling challenges, or potentially just some issues in navigating the space. And then I wanted to use this center example for both kind of the showing the shininess of the floor. So you can see there's a different flooring as well as a different finish on both of these floors. So the part of the photo that is kind of closer to the bottoms of your screen, that looks very matte. Looks less slippery, whereas the shininess from the first part of the photo or the top part of the photo makes it look a lot more slippery. And then just showing these dark mats. So of course they're there so that people can wipe off their shoes and not bring the outside indoors. But just considering a lighter colored mat can really go a long way. And then I wanted to touch quickly on the last photo. Just different considerations, always wanting to make sure that you're putting signage on the doors that they're associated with so people know, is this a door that I can access or not? What does this door lead to? You can see at the bottom of the photo the change in texture there. So that's something that could potentially pose as a tripping hazard. And then as well, I wanted to point out the clock. Sometimes we have these neat looking clocks that might have kind of what you would think would be a positive benefit to it, or as you can see here, they've got the company logo. But for an individual who's living with dementia, that's something that's going to be really confusing to them. And so I just wanted to kind of add it in as an aside that typically a digital clock is something that is a lot more dementia friendly. And then I wanted to show some positive design choices. So a couple of years ago, we had the opportunity to work with the Alzheimer's Society of New Brunswick when they created their new kind of office space and resource center for individuals who are living with dementia. And so we looked at some different design elements that I wanted to kind of point out. So here on the left, you can see their stairs. So in a navigational sense, they have really made contrast work to their advantage there. So you can see in terms of the stairs, you can clearly see in that color contrast that the stairs begin and end at those spaces. So you're not trying to kind of figure out if there's one more step at the bottom. And then as well, for our handrails, in dexterity's sense, something that is rounded is a lot more easy for somebody to grip onto. And then as well, they have this color contrast against the wall, which really indicates a change in slope. So it lets you know that you are going downstairs. And then they utilized these door decals. I guess it wouldn't be for every organization, but it is kind of a neat photo that you can show how you can get creative with design. So these door decals here are from True Doors, and typically they're used in long-term care to help give a sense of choice and ownership behind an individual's space, but also really helps with navigation. So say if somebody comes into this office, it might be more difficult, say if you're coming in from the other direction, to remember it's the third door on the right, but you might remember that you're going to the red door behind. So just different things like that. And then I also wanted to show a picture of their signage as well. So you can see universally recognized symbols and clear to read lettering, things like that. And they have this at all of their decision-making points. So here's some more examples of different signage. So they not only have it at eye level, so at 4 feet on the doors that they're associated with, but you can see here, they also have it above. So if you are navigating a space and you're trying to look forward, you can see this sign sticks right out at you that you'll be able to kind of navigate the space a lot easier. And then of course, this picture up in the upper left-hand corner just shows a navigational point that you know kind of where to go. And then I also wanted to show some different design elements in the bathroom. So the color contrasting for the toilet seat can be a really big one to help people be a little bit more comfortable because you always want to have that color contrast. If I could change a little bit more, I think I'd have a little bit more of a color contrast between kind of their neutrals and their kind of gray neutrals there, that I would have a bit more of a difference. But you can see with this toilet seat, rather than just having a white toilet seat, gray there, which is something that's going to be a lot easier for somebody who's living with dementia. Okay, so we're going to take a quick 5-minute break here and just leave some space for any questions that people might have or to get a drink. And I'm just going to queue up our slides for the next section, but I'll just pause our recording for right now, and we will come back at 11:05 and we'll go right through till 11:30. Okay, wonderful. Does anybody have any questions before we kind of dive into our last little piece here on communication and supportive strategies? And I know it's a lot to throw at you guys all in an hour and a half long session. So we definitely want to leave that space for you to kind of be able to ask those questions after the fact, or if you have any specifics based on your own organization after the fact, we'd be happy to kind of dive into that with you and be able to kind of explore some different ways that might be more specific to your organization. Okay, so if anybody has any questions throughout, please feel free just to kind of let me know. And either you can unmute yourself or you can throw it in the chat. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on some different challenges and things like that that we may want to consider. So it's important to always kind of be mindful of the different challenges that people might be experiencing. While we don't want to kind of dwell on these challenges, we need to know what might cause an individual who's living with dementia to experience our organizations in a different way than we typically would. So some different challenges to consider is that it is a very different experience for each stage and type of dementia. So if you would like to learn a little bit more like that, or on that, sorry, you can visit our Thinkific and we explore some of the different forms of dementia and some of kind of the challenges that they have experienced. But just to remember that it's not rocket science. It's not going to be the same, unfortunately, with everyone, but it's kind of taking the time to open our eyes to different experiences so that we're able to kind of think in a different way. Individuals who are accessing our businesses might have difficulty finding the right words. So kind of that tip of the tongue phenomenon. So they might be dealing with things like aphasia. And so they might come in and try to be asking again, say where the milk is, but they can't quite think of what it is. They know it, they might be able to picture it, but they can't get the words out. So considering how that might be something that would make kind of engaging in these spaces really challenging. They might use different related words or different kind of sayings for different words to try to be able to get their point across. So something that's important to remember in these instances that we really need to be patient and respectful that this person is trying to be able to engage and they're trying to really find that space to have the confidence to be able to have these interactions. So we want to give them that space to be able to do so without kind of overtaking them. They might have difficulty responding to questions appropriately. So I know a lot of times you might think of a conversation might go in a completely different direction than you expected, or different social cues might not be being followed. Individuals who are living with dementia often have slower kind of reaction time, and the way that they process different thoughts and process what they're intaking to be able then to respond is quite different. So again, it all comes down to patience. And then this last piece, a little bit having a difficulty to understand complex ideas. So if you were giving kind of directions for a task and say it has 6 different steps, that's going to be something that's really challenging. So you kind of want to break things down into one step at a time. And so just thinking of different ways that we can be supportive, especially when these challenges arise. So doing things like you're doing today by being here and educating ourselves, participating in different experiences to gain empathy and understanding. So trying to know kind of what is it that people are experiencing. You might look at the video that we explored at the beginning. There are several other videos like that if you ever want to look at them for training purposes or anything like that. So I'd be happy to link those as well if anybody is interested in that. Creating our supportive environments. So the piece that we touched on in the beginning, improving our communication practices, and then of course, meeting people where they're at and helping them live inclusively within their own community. So we need to ensure that we're not requiring people to engage the way that we like to engage. We're meeting people where their needs are and where they are interacting. So these are some communications mistakes we want to avoid. And so these are things that we might have the best of intentions and not realize that we're doing, but might be something that comes out accidentally. But if we are aware of these mistakes that we often make, it's something that we can sort of kind of slowly make those changes to changing how we interact. So these nonverbal patronizing gestures, so kind of that hand on the hip or raising an eyebrow, say visually showing that you're feeling a bit impatient about the situation. Using infantilizing language, so kind of that elder speak or kind of a babying voice that people often use, or people often kind of say, oh dear, or oh honey. Just remembering kind of to make sure that we're using supportive and inclusive language. We want to make sure that we're not invading people's personal space. So we're giving them plenty of space, that we're not making them feel uncomfortable. If we're looking for any positives that have come out of COVID, I think spatial awareness luckily has become one. And so that's something that hopefully we can look at as a positive in the future. And then sudden movements. So making sure that we're not kind of moving in these really kind of swift and crazy ways, I guess, that I know myself, you guys can't see me today, but I'm a big hand talker. And so that can be off-putting to people. So I really need to be mindful of that in the different places and with the different people that I engage with. High energy can be great in some instances, but it can certainly be off-putting to others. And then as well, avoiding complex questions. So breaking things down into steps, thinking about these yes or no answers that are going to make it easier for somebody to be able to engage, because we really want to support and encourage that two-way engagement, that we're not kind of just talking at somebody and hoping that they get out what we need them to out of the conversation. So there are some different nonverbal ways we communicate. So these are things really to kind of keep in mind, to both be mindful of and as a potential challenge, but also to use as a potential supportive strategy. So different behavioral cues we use. So thinking of kind of different gestures that we use, even if you think of behavioral cues like in school, if you heard, oh, Canada, you always knew that that was something to kind of stand up at. People will often really rely on kind of a mirroring strategy. So if they see a certain behavioral cue, see somebody else participating in that, they often will as well. Your facial expressions are a big one. And I know that's so challenging with a mask on right now, but trying to be mindful of trying to have engaging eyes, I guess I could say at this point, but being mindful of kind of knowing that your face sometimes speaks a little bit more than we actually do. Using different gestures. So if you are trying to engage with somebody, and these are different ways that we might be trying to pick up on the way that the individual who's living with dementia might be experiencing. But instead of saying, oh, that product you're looking for, it's on the last aisle on the right. It might be something that you are physically pointing them towards, or if you have the time, I think it's always great to be able to help walk people through an experience as well. And then just different sounds that you might pick up on for somebody who's living with dementia, or yourself. So kind of um, uh, like when you're nodding, I just nodded, and of course you guys can't see it, but different sound kind of cues that people use can be really big and really important. Our body language is something that's really big. It's something that can help us to express our true feelings. So if you have your arms crossed all the time, or you're really slouched, it might be something that you don't look as approachable, or you look as though you're not kind of ready to engage. So we want to be mindful of that. Mindful of a mirroring effect. So people, again, will often look around them for different cues to engage with. And it really just helps to identify different moods by our body language, because we're a lot more expressive than we think. Okay, so this is a takeaway we wanted to leave you guys with. And again, I know we're getting short here for time. So this will definitely be online as well. But this is a little acronym we came up with for dementia friendly service. So different things to remember. If there's anything you take away from this session today in terms of communication or supportive strategies, you can find it within this slide. So for our F, face-to-face, so our face-to-face communication, always making sure that we are engaging with the person head on. We're not kind of engaging from the side, because both from an auditory sense, but also a visual sense, that can be really confusing as well. Face to face really helps people to feel respected and feel supported. For our R, we want to reduce distractions as much as possible. So I know that that can be really challenging, especially when we're talking about different retail spaces and things like that. But if we're looking to have an important conversation, how do we reduce this distraction? So I believe there's a slide here in a minute that I touch on that with, but if you're looking to have an important conversation, is there a space that you can step away, or quieter space to be able to kind of have that conversation? Can you have that face-to-face interaction with somebody so that they are looking at you, you're making that eye contact, and you're helping to let them know that this is what we're focusing on right now, and letting them know that you're entirely focused on them as well. For I, we want to initiate two-way conversation. So always encouraging exchange and giving people the space and the patience to be able to engage with you and not just be spoken at. So not assuming that we know what somebody's needs are, but we're allowing them the space to be able to communicate that in whichever way they can or feel comfortable to. And then as well, if we're thinking about initiating a two-way conversation, we want to make sure that when a caregiver is involved, that that's not always with the caregiver. One of the biggest kind of things that we hear with individuals who are living with dementia is that when they receive a diagnosis of dementia, oftentimes people will just look to their care partner or their spouse to be able to answer things for them, and they won't really give them that dignity of being able to engage themselves. And then back to eye contact again. I know it's kind of redundant, but we always like to stress that that engagement is so important. It not only helps to reduce distractions. People often say that the eyes are the window to the soul. So you can kind of pick up a lot on somebody's mood and behavior as well. But it also really lets them know that you have and they have your full attention for kind of that space. And then for N, you never want to assume. So we don't want to assume that we know what somebody's trying to say, or kind of cut people off if we think we know what they're going to try and say, or what they are trying to express to us. So always kind of going above and beyond to really be able to connect with and engage with somebody to try and understand their needs. So display kind of comes back to that mirroring exercise. So displaying kind of different um, engagement strategies, our body language that we're using. So making sure that um, we're not kind of closed off or anything like that, that we're showing them that this is a safe place to engage, um, and making sure that we are kind of being a good example ourselves for engagement. And then for L is listen carefully. So listening in kind of both a literal sense, but also the other sense of um, making sure that we are listening to what's not being said as well. So looking at the body language, trying to really understand what somebody's trying to say, even reading between the lines in that case as well. And then why, yearning to understand the individual's needs. So again, doing everything that's possible to be able to support them and know what they need in that moment, and taking the time to really make sure that we do get to the finish line with them, and that, as I'll go back to kind of our first example of that video, we're not kind of being dismissive, or rushed or interrogated as we have here in the chat. We're taking the time to really be able to engage in that way. And if we're thinking of reducing distractions, I just wanted to quickly touch on this before we kind of finish off for today. So making eye contact is a really big one. You're drawing somebody in that way. Approaching people from the front, so making sure they know that you're coming. I know that we have a big tendency to kind of talk to the side of somebody, but I'm sure you can all think of an instance where you thought, I don't know if that person's actually talking to me or not. But if somebody's making eye contact with you and they're kind of right in front of you, that can be really supportive. Speaking clearly and at a slow pace. So ensuring that we're finding that perfect balance between enunciating and speaking clearly, but not in a way that uses elder speak, where we might be talking in a really loud, slow voice because we are using our biases and our assumptions that everyone that's older might be dealing with some hearing challenges. Um, so just making sure that we are really upholding kind of that respect in how we speak, but also we're being supportive at the same time. And then, of course, if possible, if you do need to have more of kind of an in-depth conversation, communicating in quiet, low traffic areas, and then asking short, straightforward questions. And I just wanted to kind of finish off today because payment might be, and kind of that exchange of both services and practices, payment might be a really big one that we want to consider. Um, of course, we can't change everything that it comes down to with this kind of portion of business, but these are things that you might want to keep in mind, especially when you're looking to kind of um, support somebody to be able to do these things on their own. Because a lot of times they do want to be able to engage and they do want to be able to pay and they don't want somebody to kind of take over. So we want to give them that space to be able to do it. I know there's a stat it's out of the UK, but 80% of individuals who are living with dementia listed shopping as one of their favorite activities. So whether that's grocery shopping, shopping at the market, shopping at a retail store, 80% of people said that that was one of their favorite activities, but 63% of those people that were surveyed said that they don't think that stores do enough. So just in small different ways, even if we come back to different kind of larger stores that have had sensory hours and things like that, that's always something to consider. Your signage, different small changes that we can make to be supportive. But I wanted to focus on or touch on before we end, in terms of kind of something that's more specific to retail, is what are we considering with payment? So the first thing to remember is that there is an abundance of options. Some things that might be a little bit challenging to kind of navigate. We might have gift cards. We might have tap, insert your card, tap your card, swipe your card, things that you have to sign off on or you don't have to sign off on, the actual physical exchange of money, especially if you're considering different processing times and the different steps in processing, that can be really challenging for somebody. So you want to remember that there are several different steps. So how do we be supportive without kind of taking over? Also, with kind of this move to technology and the TAP challenges, we want to make sure that we're walking people through that in a really supportive way. We're not throwing too many options at people all at once, or if there are a lot of options to go through, we want to be able to have that space to be able to work through things one at a time with people. So the biggest thing that you can kind of take away is really patience and breaking things down into smaller steps. So giving people the space to be able to engage and to be able to really meet people where they're at so that they can do these exchanges by themselves and that they aren't feeling rushed and interrogated. Because as you said in the chat, it does make you feel more stressed and it just makes things worse and it almost has kind of that snowball effect. So our patience is absolutely key. So we want to make sure that we're being supportive versus taking over the interaction. So we're taking the steps and we're breaking them down. So do you have a saver card? Give them the time to answer that before you're moving on to the next step. If you have to walk somebody through the different machines that we use, because I know we always like to use new ones, we need to be able to have kind of that simple to use language around these steps and these processes. And we need to just be there to really support people to be able to engage in this way. So that's kind of it for, I guess, the content I'm going to throw at you guys today. I know it is so much, but we do have, I guess, today's session built out a lot more in our Thinkific that kind of looks at some more specifics for different exchanges that you might have. It looks at a lot more design specifics. And so it's something that you can dive into and explore a lot more as well. If you are interested in joining the Thinkific, or if you're interested in showing us your space so that you can get some feedback on things like that, absolutely join us on our Thinkific link, which you can find either at personcentereduniverse.com or training.personcentereduniverse.com. Excuse me. And then as well, if it's easier or if it's an easier way to kind of exchange or engage with us, you can always email us at info@personcentereduniverse.com. So those emails all come through to me. You might get an email back from rneal@personcentereduniverse.com, but we want to be able to give you that space. So I will stop our recording for today and just thank you all for joining us. And I'll stay on for a few minutes if anybody has any questions or would like any of the resources shared or anything like that. But thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great day.